So I get the message here in the chat board that I am currently live. So thank you very much for the information, and welcome to all of you to this session number 4. My name is Rinaldo. I'm the Deputy Director for the Energy Transition Program in DNV. I'm based in Norway, and I will speak to you today about the energy transition and hydrogen specifically and its role in the energy transition. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm happy to present here, and I will continue with sharing my presentation on the screen here. So if you bear with me a moment, I will open up this PowerPoint, which I hopefully, I think that you should be able to see it. So that seems to be the case. And this presentation covers the Energy Transition Outlook 2021, which is a flagship report from DNV. And through the next 10 to 12 minutes, I will present our findings. But very quickly first, I just want to give you a brief presentation about DNV and who we are. So DNV is a private company with no external shareholders. We are owned by ourselves and steered by a council, and our purpose is to safeguard life, property, and the environment. And this is something that we have done since its formation in 1864. And our vision is to be a trusted voice to tackle global transformation, which sets the direction and the ambition for our company. We're 12,000 employees located in over 100 countries with 3,000 offices worldwide. And the purpose and the work that we do is to enable our customers and their stakeholders to manage risk and complexity with confidence. And we do that by certifying, assuring, giving expert advice, and co-creating and sharing different tools and practices. And our main business areas are energy and the maritime sector, as well as general industry. And specifically for hydrogen, we are trying to aim to be the advisor to the entire hydrogen economy. For instance, we have the world's first full-scale testing facility. We're 10 centers of excellence in different countries, and we have expertise from the production to end use of hydrogen and do significant amount of testing in over 10 different labs around the world. So with that short introduction, I'd like to jump into the energy transition outlook and set this session on hydrogen specifically off with trying to explain how we see the future towards 2050 within the sphere of energy. And so what is the energy transition outlook? We call it an independent forecast of the energy future to 2050. And you might ask yourself, why do we produce this forecast? There are a number of players out there who do forecasts and scenarios, IEA, BP, Shell being some amongst them. And it comes down to our stakeholders asking us about what do we think about the energy future. So we realized we were not able to answer this question, and thus we choose to put together a team to try to get our best estimate of the energy future, not necessarily what we want to have or different scenarios, but one single forecast, trying to take the long-term dynamics and not focus necessarily on different price fluctuations, but the long-term dynamics into account. And this is the 5th year that we're doing that. You can see below here the 4 previous energy transition outlooks. And this 5th year, there are some of the conclusion that remains the same, and some of the information that is new, for instance, the effects of the COVID pandemic. But one central feature of our forecast is that the world will stop using more energy. So over 150 years with population growth as well as economic growth, we have continuously grown our demand for energy. That we think is going to change. So as you can see, the world final energy demand in the main 3 sectors, transport, buildings, and manufacturing, are increasing towards 2030. But then in the 2030s, we see a stop in growth and a flattening out of the energy demand curve. And you might then ask why that is. Why does energy peak? And the answer lies in accelerated energy intensity reduction. We are becoming much more efficient in the way that we produce and use energy. And the main answer to that lies in electrification. So by electrifying much of the energy demand, we are increasing efficiencies significantly. Traditionally, we've had an intensity improvement about 1.7% per year over the last 20 years, which is going to increase to 2.4% over the next 20 years. And the share of electricity in the final global energy demand doubles from 19% to 38%. So even if but that doesn't necessarily mean that we solve all the world's problem with respect to emissions. Even if we had 100% renewable electricity from today, we still would not reach the Paris Agreement. But to illustrate an example about the efficiency inherent in electrification, you can see on the left-hand side here, the transport energy demand for the different energy carriers. And the red here being oil will towards 2050 half of its use. And the main reason for this is from road transport, that oil is mainly used as an energy carrier. And the second picture here in the middle shows the uptake of new vehicle sales for passenger vehicles. By 2032, we see that half of all new passenger vehicles sold is going to be electric. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the whole world follows. So the last picture here on the right-hand slide shows the market share of electric passenger vehicles over the globe. So there are some regions where the incentives and the infrastructure is in place to quickly electrify the passenger vehicle fleet. However, there are some where it takes longer time to get charging infrastructure and electricity in place. So you can see here the overall share, as I mentioned, for the electric energy demand towards increasing use of electricity as an energy carrier, where specifically coal and oil will start to decline. Gas keeps its role, but as we specifically want to talk about hydrogen, you can see that our forecast shows only a 5% global energy demand to be covered by hydrogen as an energy carrier. And I will come back to that a little bit later in this presentation. So with this significant growth of electricity, we need to have that from some production of power generation. And going forward, we will see by 2050 that 36% of all electricity production globally to come from solar, where 33% will come from wind. And as you can see, coal, oil, and gas reducing significantly towards 2050. And I want to bring a little bit of the Indian subcontinent perspective. So you can see that for India and the neighboring countries, this will be even more prominent, where the growth of energy demand is doubling and the electricity production is quadrupling from today to 2050. And of course, this significant growth will indeed generate a number of massive installations. We are forecasting 55,000 utility PV plants globally, 12,000 wind farms, 5,000 offshore wind farms, and about 1.3 billion passenger electric vehicles. While all this looks very promising in terms of growth, there are indeed a few sectors that lag behind, especially when we are considering hard-to-abate sectors. So in 2019, about 1/3 of emissions come from what is called the hard-to-abate sectors. But in 2050, almost half of the emissions will come from the hard-to-abate sectors. And the reason is that it is indeed difficult to electrify industrial heat, commercial vehicles, buildings heat, aviation and maritime, and iron ore reduction. So some of these sectors are lagging behind, and that is the reason that I told you about, where we see oil demand declining because road transport can be electrified. Coal use, the black one, is declining because electricity production can be electrified, whereas the high heat where gas is used, as well as the supplementary production of electricity, continues its path and stays about at the same level of production as today. So how about hydrogen? Where does hydrogen come in, and why do we see it not being taken up much more? And hydrogen derivatives are a promising solution for the hard to decarbonize sectors. But it is today expensive and inefficient due to the energy losses in its value chain. And we see it only becoming competitive globally by the 2040s, and that means that it has to be decarbonized. So hydrogen production today, mainly based on natural gas, will transition over to green hydrogen production by renewable electricity production from dedicated renewable sources. And looking at the demand sectors, we have the traditional ammonia and refinery production, which will continue over the forecast period. And the new demand coming in from green and blue hydrogen will be from the manufacturing sector, from the building sector, and from the road, maritime, and aviation sector. But it is indeed not only, it's only in the 2040s that this demand will take off, and will come a little bit too late, but strong. So from a production point of view, where does this hydrogen come from? And initially, it will be from blue hydrogen, whereas for the traditional hydrogen demand, we will see gray and brown hydrogen continue, but decline towards 2050. However, it is in grid and specifically dedicated renewable energy production units where the most hydrogen will be produced from. And the reason for that being late is the cost compression curves. So if we look at solar and wind, they are becoming cost competitive already today in many places of the world with competing technology, which is where we call this relative cost curve, steeple cost. EVs in the early 2020s in many regions is the reason why we see a big uptake of electric vehicles. In Europe, this will go fast. And in Norway, where I sit today, the most recent numbers is that 70% of all new passenger vehicles sold are electric vehicles. So it will happen, and it will happen all over the world eventually. But for hydrogen, the cost compression is taking longer time, and it's only in the 2040s on a global basis where we see hydrogen, decarbonized hydrogen, being able to compete with existing technologies. So overall, we see an equal split between fossil and non-fossil energy in 2050. And including decarbonized gas and oil, it's a little bit above that, 53% decarbonized green non-fossil energy compared to 47% of the fossil energy, which indeed has a big impact on the climate. So if we look at the cumulative emissions towards 2050, we see that already by 2029, we will have exhausted the 1.5 degree carbon budget. And by 2053, we will have exhausted the 2 degree carbon budget, and emissions indeed are not declining as fast as we would have liked. So by extrapolating the emissions towards 2100, we forecast a global warming of about 2.3 degrees centigrade. So we are not forecasting the energy transition that we would like to see. We do not see hydrogen taking the role in the hard to abate sectors. And with that, I conclude my presentation. We have a number of publications available. These were presented and launched on Wednesday this week, so they are brand new for everybody interested in finding more details. And I give the word back to the moderator, and I thank you very much for the attention and hope for an interesting discussion afterwards.